Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be doing the Samsung SM-T550 charge port replacement. This is also the same as the SM-T555. Thereabouts. It all comes apart about the same way. We're pretty lucky with this one. We don't have to take the front glass off to get to the charge port. We don't have to solder on a new charge port. All that we're going to have to do with this one is pull the back plastic off, and then a couple of other components come out, and then this flex cable will come straight out, and we just swap the parts over, do it all in reverse. The downside to this one is that everything in it is pressure fit. Basically what pressure fit means is you've got little plastic clips that are going to come over and hang on to stuff, and the downside to that is that quite often while you're prying away at it, you're going to break the plastic clips. That's our first little hurdle that we need to get over. The other one is the actual charge port replacement itself is not always going to be a guaranteed fix for a no charge situation. In this case, I believe it was charging and it was turning on, and then it's just stopped. It's pretty clear on this one that it's going to be the charge port. I can't actually show you in the camera because it's too dark in the charge port to find, but underneath decent light you're going to see the little pins on the USB have actually been pushed out of the way. So physical damage is generally the first place that we start with anything like this. See broken, fix broken. So away we go. We're going to try and keep this as in shot as possible because there is one other video on this on how to replace this, and they're sort of doing everything off to the side like this. Apologies if that isn't how that ends up. So starting off, we're going to use our flexible pry tool. This is a metal pry tool. This is a plastic back cover to it, so you've got to be very careful that you're not going to scratch anything. And all we're going to use this pry tool for is just to get a gap. Now, even though these are all built the same, they all wear differently, so not everything is going to come apart the same way. Now at the moment I'm just looking for the best spot for this particular one. It may be different on yours. There we go. So I've got a little bit of purchase, and you might be able to see it. There is a gap starting to open there. So we're just going to work at that gap for a little bit. Now be very, very careful whenever you're working on a Samsung specifically. Whether it's a phone, whether it's a tablet, these are, what's the word, built with much tighter tolerances than what an Apple device is. Now I've just switched over to one of these. Is a bit more well worn. These are a 0.71mm flexible guitar pick. And I try and use plastic on plastic whenever I can, because plastic is very hard to be scratched by plastic, whereas metal is going to gouge, break, scratch. It'll look awful by the time you're done. We might not actually be able to start there. We're starting to get a bit too much of a bend for my liking in the glass. Yeah. Now, these Samsung tablets, there we go, we've got the plastic in. So now we've got the metal out and the plastic's, whoop. Well, okay, maybe not. Let's try the other side. There's less buttons and things in the way here. So the buttons themselves, there is actually extra clips around them. So what I'm doing here is we're pushing into the gap, and we're sliding at the same time. And you've got to be very careful not to slide too far, or you're going to start breaking things. We're just trying to get it so that we get a small amount of purchase on that gap, Not quite there yet. We got it. We're in there. Might have to go. I think this one by iFixit is maybe a little bit thinner. No, still not enough for the guitar pick yet. Okay, now notice I'm pushing towards the glass, not towards the plastic. If you push towards the plastic back, you're actually bending the glass out. And as we all know, plastic bends a little bit better than glass does. So, I'm just going to turn that around. Oop. I almost lost that then. So we're trying to lever the plastic away. We're not trying to pry and push. We're levering. There we go. So now that we have one guitar pick in there, quite sturdy, we're just going to run that back and forth. You see how now we're starting to create a gap. You're going to hear the camera go off a few times as we are pushing on the power button by doing it on this side. That's why I started on the button side first and then changed my mind and went to the other side because this side wants to come off a little bit easier. Yeah. Well, the customer's going to have a few keepsake snapshots. There we go. Okay. When you get up towards the bottom, or down towards the bottom, depending on how you're looking at it, you will actually start to notice a little bit more resistance. There we go. Just keep moving along. You may have to come back and do them a few times. If you find one corner is really hard to work your way around, you can actually leave one guitar pick there and then move on with a second guitar pick. That's why I always keep two on the bench. Yeah, we may actually have to go around the top on this model. There we go. Let's open that one back up. I'll remove that. We'll start working on the top. So once you get, you'll notice like once you get started and you start working your way around, it does just want to sort of come apart quite easily. Just be extra careful around your buttons because they do want to fall out. And it's also a really easy spot to crack the, hang on, so just along here where the gap is, that really wants to crack, so you've got to be quite careful around here. Sometimes it may even be best to start again down the other side once you've leave it off the other side a little bit. And you'll notice that you'll actually get to a point where it's just going to completely fall apart. And that's what we're aiming at. Just got to sort of persevere with it. There we go. Now we'll open up our micro SD, and there is no micro SD in there. I did check that before we began, but it's force of habit to double check again, because the first time you don't double check something is when you're going to break it. There we go. Should be just a couple more, and then this back side is free. And then we get to start on the nightmare that's inside of this thing. go. Now we have it mostly free. There we go, and we're off. We're done. So I'll just set that one aside. Okay, now just make sure that we're all in shot and that we're not pushing anything that will break the screen. Alrighty. Coming along the bottom here, you've got a series of screws. So there is one here, 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 and here. And sometimes you need to take that one out. We're going to try and leave that in there. This is the snap lock connector for any cases that you might have for this. The very first thing that we're going to do from here is actually disconnect the battery. Now notice I'm using a plastic tool on this. And the way that these batteries disconnect is you're going to pry up. This socket wants to come straight up. So we'll see which side we can get a bit of purchase on. We might actually switch to a slightly stronger spudger. These are the ones that come with the iFixit kit. They're a lot firmer on the tip of them. These are 10 for $2 spudgers from eBay. These little cheap ones are brilliant for getting into things that you know you're going to destroy your spudger on. So for example, removing iPad glass after you've had a break and you've got to chisel off around all the edge. These are great because they won't damage the quite soft aluminum. Whereas this one here, besides the fact that they're quite expensive, they just have no give in them, so you can't actually get under the pieces of glass. What we're trying to do here though is a little bit firmer. May even go up underneath the wiring, I think, which is never advised. Nope, that isn't going to work either. Oh. We may have to switch to tweezers. So these are plastic tip tweezers. These are not metal tweezers. And I'm just trying to get up underneath all of the wires at once to try, and there we go. So now that I've got that side, we're going to come back around. And come up underneath this side. Actually, let's switch to the spudger again. These were never designed to come apart. There we go. So now that we have our battery free, I'm actually just going to throw some tape over that quickly. It's just regular electrical tape. There. So now that battery isn't going to turn the thing back on in a hurry. Let's move. Let's work upside down. Why not? That way you can see it a bit better. Okay. Screwdriver. Using our iFixit kit again, and at an estimate, I reckon that's going to be a 00, at least. Yep, 00. There we go. Could do this with a 000 if that's all that you've got. Doesn't really matter. A spare magnet. So the iFixit kit also comes with a little magnet on a bit. They're quite helpful for getting the screws out around the speakers because the speakers themselves are magnetic. We might actually work the right way around because I'm using the screw mat at the same time. And we want to keep all of the screws in the same place from where they came out. Because although I haven't actually looked at this one to see whether or not there are any differences, but quite often manufacturers put booby traps in, and they'll put a longer screw that looks identical and has the same head on it and the same thread in a position near a shorter screw, and if you put the long screw in the short screw, you'll end up putting a screw right through the LCD or through the circuit board. It'll do something you don't want it to. Okay. Now the fun bit. Now these, I'll just pop that screwdriver to the side, and my tweezers back. These speakers, as I said before, are pressure fit. Now, before I start this, actually, I guarantee you that both of these will fly across the camera, like fly across the screen. Being a pressure fit part, they're under pressure. And now, normally you would never pry against a circuit like this, because what's going to happen is you'll scratch the circuit, you'll bend something, you'll knock a component off. This is the part that's broken. We're going to replace it with this. Hopefully, if that's the right part. You can never tell with parts like that. Sometimes it looks like the right part and it says it's the right part, and then you order the apparently right part and it shows up and it's completely different. Already being a different color isn't a great sign. We at least know that we've definitely gotten an aftermarket part. There's nothing wrong with aftermarket parts, except that they're not made by the same people that made this device, so sometimes they won't work. There could be a model change. Oh, come on. You gotta be really careful prying at this though, even though we're gonna replace this part, because underneath that part is our LCD. And prying at our LCD is never a good thing. Come on. There we go. So now we're free. Now these aren't actually connected in any way to the board. They use pressure pads or contact pads. Just keep in mind which side was which. They are pretty different. You shouldn't be able to mix them up too easily. Sometimes, no, we're going to go, where are we going to go for this one? There. There we go. What does it say? Flew away. Okay. Here's your second part. Now there is a little tiny piece of tape here that we're going to try and want to keep. Now this one pries straight up. There we go. Now at this point you can just peel this straight off and throw the new part on. Some people would test at this point. They'd plug in the new one and check that way. I don't like doing that with USB ports, mainly because the micro USB ports are never truly alive. They're just less dead. And they have a habit of snapping off the board when you plug them in. So this is that piece of tape that I was saying we need to hang on to. And I'll do that a bit nicer in a second. Okay. Hey, we got the right part. Alrighty. I might switch over to some metal tweezers. There's actually a nice little pad that's marked out as to where it's supposed to go. Just there. I do apologize if I go off camera. I'm still getting used to being underneath the camera. There we go. So this should pretty much fall into place there. You'll actually notice some locating pins here and here, and there is a snap, another pressure fit part just there. And then we'll get our little sticker. And just push that down like that. I don't know what that does, but it was there, so we're going to leave it there. Okay, now with our flex cable, there's going to be a few little bends in it. What I like to do is plug it back in. And one of the tricks to locating these is lay it down where you think it is, and if it doesn't slide around, when you do that, you will sort of wiggle it around. It's good to start pushing down. Alright, so that's connected. Like I said, at this point we could put the battery back in, plug it in, and give it a test. We're not going to do that because I do not want to break this USB port off the board. Now you'll notice that this doesn't really want to stay where we've put it. That's because the speaker is going to come back down over the top and pressure fit on top. Just as long as everything is where it's supposed to be, it should all go back together nicely. Now there is a metal bracket that goes on our old charge port. Now that's basically destroyed at this point. We've put too many bends in it. We will locate it down over our charge port here. Oh, that wants to hook around. No, it doesn't. There's little tabs. Alright. So you may need to push here and here with your plastic spudger. Do not use screwdrivers. Don't use a flat blade screwdriver for any of this. And what I'm going to do now is pop some screws back in just to make sure that USB port and that headphone jack are both going to not move around while we do any of this. Everything else on this ribbon cable is very flat. These are quite raised, and they're going to be the one thing that stops you putting this back together correctly. Alright, let's get some speakers in. Now you saw how much force these were under when I took them out. That is about how much force you want to use when you put them back in. You want to hear some nice little clicks. Just make sure they're nice and flat. Otherwise you're going to have this ugly bulge in the back case. And we'll pop the screw back in for that one as well. Now all of these screws are screwing into plastic, not metal. Don't over tighten them. Basically when you're just flicking the screwdriver like that, if it can't move anymore, it's tight. Alright, let's have a quick look at our gap there. We're all good. And we'll come over to this side. Now this side is going to be a little bit more difficult. I like to get one side in and then work my way over. And there we go. First time I did that, I heard that snap and I thought it was the glass. It was not the glass. We were very lucky. There we go. Then other times I hear that snap and it was the glass, and we were not very lucky. But that is what happens when you fix things. Okay, so we're going to pull our tape back and just make sure that we haven't damaged any of these pins along here. Because if you get these bent in a weird way, you're never going to get this thing back on. Now same again, you want to line it up, make sure it's not going to move around anywhere, and then push down. So that's now live. We'll put that one screw in that we missed in the corner, And we can put our back plate back on and we can test everything. Actually, let's give that a test before we keep going. Now make sure you don't have any screws or anything on your mat. I only have shards of broken glass, so I'm good to go. Be very, very careful plugging this in. Give it just a moment. And there's our charge symbol. We know that at least our charger is working. At this point we can try and turn it on. And we know that the battery is working now because we've got 38% coming up. Actually, I won't try and turn it on at the moment because I've got to get the case on anyway. I don't want to sit here taking screenshots. Okay, so we've got our micro SD card door up. And we will make sure everything is lined up. I might just give that lens a quick wipe. So we've got our camera lens here and here. Just going to give that a really quick tickle with just a standard cotton tip. There's nothing on this. You can use a bit of isopropyl if you know that you've got fingerprints on there. I don't think I touched it, so we're not going to do that. Now, getting this back together, you sort of want to pick one end. Now, the bottom end was the hardest end to take off, so it's probably going to be the hardest end to get on if we pressure fit everything else first. So we'll start at the bottom. And we're just trying to hook that case onto where the clips are now. We're not trying to push them down just yet. So you see how we've closed that gap there? That means that all of those clips are where they're supposed to be and they're hooked in. Now you just want to start on one corner. There we go. Once you get that one corner in, you're basically good to go. You can just work your way around nice and quickly. So we have other things to fix. Don't want to waste our time doing something forever. There we go. Okay, now check for gaps. So here we have a gap. Here's a bit of a gap. Here's a bit more of a gap. Now sometimes it may be easier to lay it down. This way you know that you're not putting too much pressure on the LCD because you're spreading the pressure out. You may also have to pry it back into place. Now, if you're putting too much pressure on something, if you feel like you're putting too much pressure on something, you probably are. And it's a good point, a good time to sort of stand back and double think about what you're doing. Yeah, so we've got all of these little risers here and there where it's just not fitting on correctly. And they sort of all add up and put extra pressure on all the parts that aren't working. So just keep working your way around. Just persevere with it. You want to get like a sliding motion happening, and eventually it will actually click in. I promise you. It's just perseverance. Now I'm sort of trying to massage it back this way to pull the the plastic over. This is where I was saying we may need to pry it back into place. The same way that we got it off will be the way that we get it on. Just got to pry that plastic over. We need a stronger spudger. Need a strong and thin spudger, so we're back to the metal. So we're using the screen as the fulcrum, taking screenshots as we go, very important. We're going to push and lever at the same time. There we go. This is great footage. Me struggling with the plastic cover. There we go. Okay, so we'll just double check one last time that all of our edges are nice and flush. There we go. Screen turns on and off. And we'll make sure that we're still going to charge. Yep. Charger plugs in nicely and it knows that it's charging. We're good to go. Samsung SM-T550 and T555 charge port replacement. We're all done. I've been Joel. This is Sorted IT. Please subscribe, like, share it, do all those things. Hit the bell, I don't know, all the stuff that YouTube people are supposed to say. Or don't, I don't really care. Live your life. Alright guys, see you later.